Alright, let's get started with 5, 7, completing the square. And so in this section, we're going to learn to solve equations by completing the square. We'll learn what that is in a second. And then we're going to also rewrite functions completing the square. So that's the only new vocabulary today, is completing the square. Everything else we know how to do. Alright, so a couple skills we're going to need in this one. We're going to simplify each expression. Let me do 1, and that will be able to take you through 2 and 3, and then I'll do 4 as well. So number 1, x minus 3, there's 2 of them, so we can write squared. That's all we're looking for on that one. It's a perfect square. 2 and 3 work in a similar way. And number 4, the square root of 25 is 5. You should be able to do the rest. Alright, remember what we learned for imaginary numbers for number 6. And 7, square root the top and square root the bottom. Alright, so let's get going here. Alright, what we want to be able to do is simplify as much as we can. So, sometimes we're going to be given a perfect square, right? If we add to 10 and multiply to 5, that's going to be x plus 5 and x plus 5. 5 times 5 is 25. 5 plus 5 is 10. And we can rewrite that, since there's 2 of them, as x plus 5 squared. And still equals 36 on the other side. Okay? The nice thing about doing this, what we want to be able to do with all these problems, is get a nice perfect square, because we can square root this, and all of a sudden we have x all by itself. The only thing we want to keep in mind here is that we're always going to have 2 answers when we do a square root. The positive and the negative. So positive 6 and negative 6. Let's minus 5 to get x by itself, and we're going to minus 5 from everything we see. So x equals either 1 or negative 11. Alright, and we could plug those back in to check them, but they do work. 1 or negative 11 is our answer here. Alright, so I want you to do the exact same steps and see if you can do understanding check number 1. Alright, so now sometimes it doesn't come out perfectly. Sometimes when we start, we don't have a nice perfect square like x minus 7 squared. Right? That's what you should have had for the understanding check. And so if we don't, we need to force it by completing the square. And so the way we're going to do that is we're going to take whatever number is next to the x and cut it in half, divide it by 2, and then square that number. Alright, so that's how we complete the square. We go b over 2 squared. Alright, so here's what we're going to do. Let's just complete the square here. What's our missing value? Alright, so b is negative 8. Alright, so we need to take that and cut it in half. What's negative 8 cut in half? That's negative 4. And then we need to square that. So what's negative 4 squared? We're going to get 16. And that's the number that completes the square if we have negative 8 next to the x. Alright, so we take the 8, cut it in half, and then square it. We get 16. See if you can figure out the missing value for this one. A little trickier because you're going to have some fractions here. That's okay. Use fractions, don't use decimals on this. Alright, if you're ready, let's complete the square here if we don't have a perfect one. Alright, and here's what we're going to do here. What we want is to first things move the 5 to the other side. Alright, because 5 is not a perfect square. It's not going to help us. So now we're just going to complete the square like we did in the last problem. What's our b? Negative 12. We're going to cut it in half. So b over 2 is negative 6. Let's go ahead and square it. And so we get 36. So we need to add that in right here. But if we do that, we need to do it to the other side as well. Can't just add numbers to one side without doing it to the other side. And so now, x minus 6 squared is the perfect square, because 6 plus 6, sorry, negative 6 plus negative 6 gets us to 12, and 6 times 6 is 36. That equals, what's negative 5 plus 36? That's 31. we're going to square root both sides, so x minus 6 equals the square root of 31. Don't forget your plus or minus. And then to finish it, we're going to write x equals 6 plus or minus the square root of 31. And that would be our answer. All right, so we get x by itself that way. All right, see if you can do the exact same steps for understanding check number 3. Okay, so now sometimes we're going to get complex solutions. What that means is you got negative square roots, but that's okay. We know how to deal with those. We're going to bring in I. So let's go ahead and throw our 36 to the other side. And what's half of 8? Half of 8 is negative 4. Let's go ahead and square that, and we get 16. So we'll add 16 in here. Got to do it to both sides. And so now we have our perfect square of x minus 4. 4 plus 4 is 8. 4 times 4 is 16. Equals negative 20. Let's square root both sides. X minus 4 is plus or minus the square root of negative 20. Can't do square roots of negatives, so we got to pull the I out front. And we'll move to the 4 to the other side. X equals 4 plus or minus I square root of 20. And we can go one more step because 20 can be split up into 4 and 5. So square root of 4 is 2. 5 has to stay inside. So final answer here is going to be x equals 4 plus or minus 2 came out, 2i root 5. That is our answer. Your turn with understanding check 4. All right, so what happens if we don't have just 1x squared? You'll notice that in the last problems, the x squared term has always just been 1x squared. All right, so in this case, we're just going to divide everything by 5 to get it by itself. So here we've got, now we have x squared equals 6 over 5x plus 8 over 5. Okay? Probably easier in this one to do it as decimals, so I'm going to rewrite them as decimals. X squared equals 1.2x plus 1.6. Let's move the x term over so we can complete our square. And what's half of 1.2? Half of 1.2 is 0.6. And if we go ahead and square that, there's a negative in there. If we square that, we're going to get 6 times 6 is 36, so 0.6 times 0.6 is 0.36. We'll add that on. Got to do it to both sides. And so we end up with x minus 0.6 squared equals 1.96. And let's finish this off. X minus 0.6 equals the square root of 1.96. Let's grab our calculator real quick and plug that in. 1.96 square rooted, or to the 0.5 is 1.4. So we can plug that in. Don't forget plus or minus, so we can say or negative 1.4. Let's add 0.6. So we get 2. Let's add 0.6 here. We get negative 0.8. X equals. All right. So remember, anytime this problem starts with a squared, you're going to have 2 answers when you're finished. Try understanding check number 5. All right. So if you remember vertex form, we get y equals, let me rewrite it. Vertex form, y equals a x minus h squared plus k, where h comma k is the vertex of a parabola. Right in there. All right, so we want to change that up. So we can do that fairly easily if we complete the square. On this one, we want to keep y by itself. So we can't move the 2 to the other side. So we're kind of just going to make it hang out by itself. So we're going to put some parentheses here saying we're just going to deal with the completing the square part, and then we'll deal with the 2 kind of on its own. What's half of 6? Half of 6 is 3. What's 3 squared? 3 squared is 9. So we're going to say plus 9. But you can't just magically add 9. So we have to balance that out by subtracting 9 so that we keep things in balance. We haven't really changed anything if we add 9 and subtract 9. All right, we have a perfect square. This is x plus 3 squared. And 2 and 9 can be combined to get minus 7. And there's vertex form. Our vertex would be negative 3, comma negative 7. Didn't ask for that, but if it did, we could pull it right out. See if you can get both of these equations into vertex form. All right, last thing to work on. Let's do our real world connection. So we got a profit function from handmade sweaters, but that depends on the price. So if you sell them for more, you're going to make maybe more money, maybe less money. Depends on how many people buy for that. All right, so we've got an equation, and write the function in vertex form. So let's start out with this. P equals negative s squared plus 120s minus 2,000. All right, so we need to, again, just isolate the s squared and the s part. I'm going to pull a negative out. That changes this to a minus 120. And we have a space. And then minus 2,000. All right, so what's half of 120? Half of 120 is 60. And what's 60 squared? 36 with 2 zeros. So we'll say plus 3,600. But remember, this minus is distributing it in, so we're really minusing 3,600. So to counter that out, we need to add 3,600. All right, so let's clean this up. P equals negative s minus 60, right? 60 squared plus 3,600 minus 2,000 is going to be 1,600. All right, so we've got the function in vertex form. Let's find the price that yields the maximum monthly profit and the amount of the maximum profit. All right, so the amount is going to be the S, I believe. Is that correct? What does S stand for? S is the price. Yep, so we want that first. So this is going to be, our vertex here is at 60, comma 1,600. And this is in S, comma P. P is the profit, and S is the price. All right, so the price is 60. And if you sell it for $60, you're going to make a profit of 1,600. All right, and there we go. We've got it. Finish this up by doing 7A and B, and any questions, we'll go over them in class. Good luck.